Is host Eric, and I am here with famous person Beau. Would you like that to be? Would you like to refer to thusly? Oh, famous person Beau, and this is the first time I've met him in voice or picture, but I have had the opportunity to make a social mistake with him earlier in chat and comments. That was always fun. So, um, he had some very interesting things to say in the comment that I eventually got around to actually reading. Um, I want to know. I want to know about your when somebody says, "I'd like to show you my epistemology." I mean, that's a sentence. That's a sentence that intrigues me unavoidably.
I got into a very skeptical phase in the beginning of high school, and since then I haven't been able to really recover or gather enough information from the world to confirm basic facts of my reality that are a priori assumptions, like why do I exist, or even why do I ask that question, or uh, things that like require a divide between our values that are subjectively present but don't really need to be validated because they already have a structure or independence in their formation in itself. So that's when you get the idea of the universal. The universal is something that is recognized within an entire system. So anything is like the sets of all sets. Like it's a metaphor for there's only one true reality, or just that
Okay.
we can simplify. It's a very simplistic version of
Okay. Let me
uh
let me stop you and ask some questions. Okay.
yeah.
Uh, First of all, do you feel as though let's limit the conversation to morality, ethics? Okay. So
Okay.
we're talking about normative statements, namely statements that say what one ought to do or how things ought to be.
Yeah.
And in regarding to that, are you are you a moral relativist, which is to say that the moral truth is relative to the culture, or are you a moral relativist or moral skeptic that says there is no morality, or a moral absolutist of some sort?
I'm definitely a moral skeptic, but I see the teleology of morality as very important to the development of society.
What do you mean by teleology?
Like its function, what it's used for. So like what's designed just for its fact of the matter why we constructed morality to begin with, which I believe is a reaction to pain and traumas we experienced in the past. So we try to uh
If morality were more real than you seem than whatever degree of unrealness your skepticism affords it. If it were more real, what data would we have on that to suggest that it was more real? What data would suggest that?
I would say that it's just about what we conceive as important rather than what is objectively true, because objectively I don't think morality exists,
Okay,
but I
but
think
if
it's
it did,
beautiful.
how what would the evidence for it look like if it did?
I have no idea. I don't. I have never gone to that realm of thought.
Well, see, here's the thing: if we're saying it doesn't objectively exist, then we're saying it some things do objectively exist, and they have these qualities, and yet morality fails in some of those qualities or lacks those qualities, and therefore doesn't exist. So my question is, what's something you would say does objectively exist?
Anything that can be observed from multiple angles.
Okay, so can you observe jingle bells from multiple angles?
Yes, and I believe that the structure of the rationalization of what it is like the structure of it is objective.
Can you observe? Why would you not be able to observe a ethical imperative but you would be able to observe jingle bells, given that the ethical imperative has a defined form as well.
Because while it may have a form, it doesn't have a medium. So it doesn't have an expression for its.
Sure, it does. Language.
Yes, but it uses us to do that. It doesn't have its own form.
So, are you saying that the entity of jingle bells is more of an entity than the entity of a normative statement regarding a moral imperative?
I wouldn't say that, but I would say that it's not anymore. I think it's just you can. It depends what side of the coin you really look at jingle bells. Whether you're assuming it's just a title or whether it's an actual feature of nature that we're designing.
Okay, well,
So
listen. Let me introduce a couple of terms here that may make this a little bit of an easier conversation to have, which is I would refer to something like jingle bells or moral imperative as a time object, just as objectively true as a space object, but objectively true through a different metric, necessarily, because time objects and space objects are distinct from one another. Here's the definition. A space object is that which requires energy to change. A time object is that which requires energy to persist or that it be imprinted upon a space object. It used to be that most of our time objects were books.
yes, and I love that metaphor for like the timelessness in books. But I don't. I don't see time as something that's a feature of nature, more as something we construct with our mind.
Well, this particular label, time object, I use because it seems the naturally occurring corollary to space object. You understand why I call this rock a space object? It's because it's an object in space, right?
Yes. Yes.
So, as far as the name of the thing goes, if you, I didn't make any claims about the nature of the thing that necessitated we call it that. But what I did say is I defined the nature of something that requires energy to persist. For example, jingle bells. We can't conceive of jingle bells persisting except in the consciousness of an individual, really. Can we?
I can see how someone who doesn't have the consciousness of jingle bells could reflect upon an objective, like, directive of what the jingle bells format would be, and then cohere to that. But I think
I don't understand what you mean with that statement.
so that it can exist objectively, but still be interpreted in a subjective light. So we have to create that almost reality within ourselves.
Its
to,
objectivity is its distinctness, right? So
Yeah.
any object is an object because it's distinct from other objects. That is to say, its nature excludes that which is not it.
Mhm.
So, if we have a situation where something like a moral imperative does exactly the same thing that a song does, why would we afford a distinctness and an objective weight to a song that we don't afford to the moral imperative, especially given that the moral imperative has a lot more weight in terms of impact?
I think because the moral imperative is being directed by the individual, while the song itself is something that has its own form.
Okay, but listen, there are normative systems or normative approaches that in fact are not that exist and can be referenced and are independent from the individual advocating them. For example, I advocate a negative rights framework that is a simple moral imperative, which is the.
But I would argue that an object can't be moral. Like if I killed someone with a cup, I couldn't say that.
I'm not saying
sorry,
that though.
cup
I'm not.
is like.
I'm not saying
Huh?
anything about. I'm not saying anything about space objects or even time objects. I'm saying a moral imperative, which is a rule, which indicates, which is prescriptive. It says, if one is to behave morally, one ought to determine one's actions according to this algorithm.
I can see how it can be validated by objective systems because we have to make sure of our reality through objective like nature, but to expand upon that is to take a subjective value and reduce it to simple terms like good, bad.
No.
This is superior,
Wrong.
inferior.
No, completely wrong. Absolutely not. No way in hell. No way in hell. No, listen.
You don't think that morality has
Here's where you're making your mistake. You are fixated on this word subjective and objective. You are concerned that the involvement of individual human beings in the maintenance and existence of a given object there somehow invalidates it. But it doesn't. There's no warrant.
I'm not saying
You have no warrant for that invalidation. Yes, you are. Of course, you're invalidating.
I'm not. I love that. Like, I'm an INTP. I have like the introversion about subjectivity. I'm all in my head. I'm completely.
No, I know, but this distinction you're making. What I'm saying, but you're not addressing my core point. My core point is this: that there is no less tangible absolute reality to a moral imperative that is logically consistent, such as the negative rights imperative, than there is to a song like Jingle Bells, or than there is to this rock. It's just as objectively and absolutely and universally true as this rock is objectively and physically in my hand.
What verifies it?
Well, first of all, it never conflicts with itself, so it's consistent. Second of all you have to do to verify it is go kill a toddler.
Can you give me an example of a universal truth
Sure.
that will be
Absolutely.
a universal truth?
Yes.
Give me an example.
The negative rights framework, all right, is that which confers a duty upon another. The negative rights framework says every human being has the duty to not interfere in the rights in the business of another. Those rights can be forfeit if you engage in aggression. So it's basically a prohibition on aggression. What's that?
What if it's to save lives? What if there's something superseding that?
Okay, well, see, what you're saying there is what if there are utilitarian concerns that ought to take precedent over the deontological concerns? The answer is they never ought to. They never ought to. Huh? What's that?
Not just utilitarian concerns. Any concerns.
That's the only kind of concern that could possibly be at issue. It's the only concern that could be at issue. Remember, the negative rights framework is the only one that doesn't conflict with itself. So the only possible objection could be utilitarian.
Why would it be utilitarian?
Well, what you just said was a utilitarian argument. You said, well, what if it's to save lives? Well, here's the problem with your what if it's to save lives things. First of all, you're saying to save lives. You're right off the bat. We're noting that you're making an argument to justify a rights violation. It's okay for me or the government or somebody else to aggress against this person, even though they've committed no violence. And the reason it's okay is because it's going to serve some greater good. However, there's multiple problems with that. One, I don't agree with your prediction. No matter how much work you put into the prediction, you can't possibly account for all the variables. And number two, if your prediction, I disagree with the damage you do to the integrity of the system, because by justifying rights violations, by supposedly preventing further rights violations, you actually are the cause of the rights violations in the first place.
Okay, as long as it's not intrinsically a part of nature, I don't see it as objective. I see it within the domain of the mind.
That distinction is arbitrary and meaningless.
No, it's not. It's very important, because if it's not part of nature, it's not self-creating.
Listen, first of all of the universe that we experience is necessarily contained within each individual human being. It can't possibly be what you're saying. Here's why. If you have to think about it, reality being manifest from an observation standpoint. So, by your understanding, this sentence makes the answer to this sentence is, well, of course. If I say, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound? From your perspective, from your understanding of objectivity, the answer must be, of course.
Yes, I think so.
But it's not. The answer is, those are contradictory premises. If nobody's there to see it, how do you know it fell down?
I think that's more of a commentary on, like, teachership, like, and how
what ship?
Teachership, like, not teachership. What's the word? Like, just it's like a God, what's the certain word for it? I forgot. Anyway, no, it doesn't matter. But it's a phrase we use to pass down certain knowledge rather
than knowledge. The knowledge you're supposed to take from it is what knowledge I'm telling you right now.
Knowledge that communication can have subjective and objective variables to it. Like,
If
you
a
can't
tree
just,
falls in the forest and no one's there to make a sound, does it? No one's there to hear it or see it. Does it make a sound?
that is just to make an example of a distinction that we can make.
No, it's not. It's an actual question I'm asking you. And the question, and you
I-
think it's a distinction you can make. You think it's a distinction you can make. That's the
Yeah,
problem.
it makes a sound, but it's the distinction between whether you think it's a vibration or whether you think it's something that's a
Okay.
a subjective thing.
Hey,
That's
Beau.
mine.
Beau, listen. If I were to say this, if if um if circles were squares and turtles were bananas, then if 5 children cross the street and it's 1 mile distance from here and they're traveling 4 miles per hour, are you going to answer the math question or not? Are you going to answer that math question? Because that's what you just did with the tree thing. I said at the beginning, when I said if a tree falls in the forest, in other words, if somehow we know through observation that a tree falls in the forest, and we don't know through observation that a tree falls in the forest, then does it blah blah blah. Who the fuck cares what comes after the does it, right? That's where your objectivity breaks down. You cannot objectively think that anything exists without it being observed. You can't even conceive of a non-observed thing because to do so is to conceive of observing it. Quantum mechanics tells us you cannot know both where you are and where you're going at the same exact time. So what do we take from this? We also know that things collapse from quantum position according to observation. So what do we take from this? That your conception of reality is faulty. That we're each manifesting we're each rendering reality independently, probably, right? Otherwise, there's a single master. Otherwise, you just prove God. There's a single master observer.
I think I don't think quantum physics challenges our ontology, but our perception of our ability to examine the world. I don't think it has anything to do with.
You're not factoring in the observation factor enough at all. You're not considering the reality that yes, this is objectively real because you're observing it. You don't know if it's still here when you disappear.
It's about the particle being able to identify with a state, whether it's being examined or not. So it changes its state if it's colliding with new information. And that new information being sent in is something that is necessary to get that examination.
Okay, so let's hold on.
To interfere with nature, we have to have a new model of understanding that is not inherently natural, but presupposes the effects of nature.
So, Beau, show me some of that data from the unobserved particles so we can compare it. Oh, that's right. We weren't observing them.
It's a wave.
Okay, so show me some of the data from the unobserved waves. Oh, that's right. It's logically impossible what I just said.
No, we see the tropes and the highlight. You can see the effect of it.
Oh, so we observed it then, right?
But we didn't observe the particle, we observed the wave of the effect.
I understand what you're saying, that if in fact there is some part in the middle that is unobserved, right, that we can deduce things about the nature of that thing. But you seem to forget, you're saying, if there's some part inside a Christmas present that's not a Christmas present, then we'll be fine. What I'm saying is you got to observe at some point in this process, and that collapses the superposition. You're failing to account for this fundamental engine of reality.
Can you repeat that?
I said observation must happen at some point in this process. If observation happens at the beginning, observation happens at the end, there is necessarily going to be a collapsing inward of the quantum superposition. You cannot talk to me at all. You can't even conceive of actually unobserved shit.
I don't think that's more of an argumentation for a meta framework rather than a observer fault. Like there's
it's not a fault. It fundamentally undermines your whole position on objectivity.
No, it doesn't. I don't think so at all. I think that objectivity still can be confirmed as a concept that we can use and compare with reality.
But you fail to draw a distinction from that which is subjective if you fail to account for the observation aspect that I pointed out.
No, I think it's still coherent.
Then you're looking at two contradictory premises and going, I'm fine, I'm going to put you both in my mouth. And that makes no sense.
No, but it's not about whether it's objective or subjective. It's about its affecting nature. It's about what we're observing.
Okay, but then you just eliminated the distinction.
Oh, huh? Yeah, yes, but because I'm supposing a new distinction that we are what we're doing is not to inherently observe nature, but to understand its principles and its presumptions to predict the future.
Okay, well, is that a descriptive behavior? Is that a description of what we are doing, or is it a prescription of what we ought to be doing?
What we ought to be doing, because our epistemologies can be reductive or constructive or completely like like examinative. Like you just go deeper and deeper.
Okay, well, so you agree then that there's some sort of more ethical course of action forward than and some less ethical course of action, right?
Yes, but I don't think that that has anything to do with the individual as much as to do with the measurements for the outcome. So there's no more immoral individual. There's just the outcome of the effect.
Well, you're good at shifting ground, but that's what you're doing. You keep shifting back and forth to avoid the core point. You're avoiding the question. Now look, I gotta go pee. You're doing a fantastic job, by the way. You're a very smart guy. I enjoy this little battle we're having here. I didn't anticipate. I didn't anticipate going straight into throwdown mode. We took fucking 5 seconds of breath to say hi and just started throwing down right away. I gotta go pee though, so let's stop this video. That's 20 minutes, quick. Wow. Thanks for watching Talk with Famous People. Thank you, famous person Beau, for an exciting battle, and we'll be right back to make another video.